You command the largest army on Earth, but the money you pay your soldiers is worth less than an arcade token. It is 268 AD. Rome was not conquered. It turned its own currency into a weapon and pointed it at itself. This was not a collapse. It was mathematics. Within 2 generations, the price of wheat increased by 20,000%. Soldiers refused pay. Tax collectors demanded grain instead of coin. Regional commanders began minting their own currency because the state version was worthless. Rome did not collapse from external invasion. It had already destroyed the only mechanism that allowed a pre-industrial empire to coordinate action across 3 million square miles. This was not corruption. This was incentive design under fiscal pressure, and every iteration made the next debasement mathematically inevitable. The denarius entered circulation in 211 BC as a military payroll instrument. It contained 4.5 grams of silver. That ratio remained stable for 200 years because Rome controlled the Spanish silver mines and maintained a positive plunder-to-expenditure ratio. Soldiers were paid on schedule. Grain imports were predictable. Long-distance trade required convertible currency, and the denarius was accepted from Britannia to Syria because its metal content was verifiable. The system was not based on trust. It was based on weight. When Augustus standardized the coinage system in 23 BC, he locked the denarius at 3.9 grams of silver with 95% purity. This was not symbolic. Roman merchants used scales. A contract for 10,000 denarii was a contract for 37 kilograms of silver. Deviations were detectable within a single transaction. The empire functioned because value could not be edited retroactively. That constraint dissolved in 64 AD. Nero reduced the denarius to 3.4 grams at 93% purity. The adjustment was small enough to avoid immediate panic, but large enough to stretch the treasury by 11%. The decision was not irrational. Nero faced a fiscal shortfall after the Great Fire of Rome. He could raise taxes, cut military salaries, or dilute the currency. He chose the option with the longest delay between action and consequence. The Senate did not object. Soldiers did not mutiny. Merchants adjusted their scales. The precedent was set. Debasement was now a policy instrument. Over the next 60 years, emperors reduced the denarius in incremental steps. By 117 AD, under Trajan, it weighed 3.0 grams at 89% purity. By 161 AD, under Marcus Aurelius, it was 3.3 grams at 79%. Each emperor inherited a smaller fiscal margin than his predecessor. Each emperor passed the problem forward. The trajectory was clear, but the alternative was collapse within a single reign. This was not weakness. This was structural optimization under deteriorating conditions. The Antonine Plague arrived in 165 AD and killed an estimated 5 million people. Tax revenue fell. Military recruitment became more expensive. Rome's borders were now defended by salaried soldiers instead of land-grant veterans, and those salaries were fixed in denarii. Raising taxes would trigger revolt. Cutting the army would invite invasion. The only variable the emperor could adjust without immediate blowback was the metal content of the coin. By 194 AD, Septimius Severus reduced the denarius to 50% silver. The coin still circulated. Markets still functioned. But the price signal had been severed from the resource signal. A soldier's salary was technically unchanged, but his purchasing power had been cut in half. Bread cost more. Weapons cost more. Loyalty became expensive. Severus responded by raising soldier pay by 33%. He funded this increase by minting more debased denarii. The fiscal gap widened. His successors repeated the cycle. By 215 AD, Caracalla introduced the Antoninianus, a coin marketed as worth 2 denarii but containing only 1.5 denarii worth of silver. It was accepted because refusal would imply distrust of the emperor, which was treason. Within a decade, merchants began hoarding old denarii and spending new Antoniniani. This is Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good money when legal tender laws prevent price discrimination. The empire was now operating 2 parallel economies. One used real silver. One used scrap metal disguised as money. The state only had access to the second, By 260 AD, during the crisis of the 3rd century, the Antoninianus contained 2% silver. The number of coins in circulation increased by 1,000%. Prices responded accordingly. A modius of wheat that cost 8 denarii in 200 AD cost 200,000 denarii by 301 AD. This is not inflation. This is the market reasserting the weight-to-value ratio that the state tried to obscure. The collapse was not sudden. It was granular. Regional governors stopped forwarding tax revenue to Rome because the currency they received was worthless by the time it arrived. Frontier legions began demanding payment in gold or grain. Soldiers who were paid in debased currency deserted or sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome had 26 emperors. Most were elevated by their legions. Most were killed by their legions. This was not chaos. This was a market for sovereignty operating under the same incentive structure as any other auction. Diocletian attempted to restore order in 301 AD by issuing the Edict on Maximum Prices, a decree that fixed legal prices for over 1,000 goods and services. The penalty for overcharging was death. The edict failed within 2 years. Goods disappeared from official markets and reappeared in illegal ones. Enforcement was impossible because the enforcers were paid in worthless currency. The problem was not greed. The problem was that the state had destroyed the only tool that allowed it to coordinate economic activity at scale. By 312 AD, Constantine abandoned silver coinage entirely and introduced the solidus, a gold coin with fixed weight and purity. It circulated successfully for 700 years. The Roman state had finally learned that currency manipulation only works until it becomes predictable. Once markets begin pricing in debasement, the policy ceases to function. But the Western Empire never recovered. The solidus stabilized Constantinople, not Rome. The Western provinces had spent 2 generations adapting to economic disintegration. They built localized supply chains. They stopped relying on long-distance trade. They replaced currency with barter and land tenure. By the time the currency was fixed, the infrastructure that required currency had already been replaced. Rome did not fall in 476 AD. It had already decentralized into a network of independent military zones held together by personal loyalty rather than institutional continuity. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus was a formality. The empire had stopped functioning as a fiscal entity a century earlier. The United States left the gold standard in 1971. Since then, the Federal Reserve has expanded the monetary base by 2,400%. The denarius was debased across 200 years. The dollar has been debased across 50. The pace is different. The mechanism is identical. Modern central banks do not reduce the silver content of coins. They adjust reserve requirements, interest rates, and asset purchases. The result is the same. The currency loses connection to a physical constraint. Value becomes a consensus rather than a measurement, and consensus is always cheaper to maintain than reality until it is not. The Roman Empire did not collapse because of barbarians. It collapsed because the state spent 2 centuries teaching its citizens that the currency was a political instrument rather than a measurement standard. Once that lesson was learned, the empire became administrable only through force, and force is expensive when the currency used to pay soldiers is worthless. Rome lasted longer than most states. That is not evidence of strength. That is evidence of how long a system can endure after the mechanism that made it legible has been destroyed.